So we are continuing the login validation web page involving PHP and MySQL. So the last time we discussed, we stopped at when we are connecting to the database and we retrieve the rows. So we were considering if there is no record in the database for this user. So that means the password from the database would be null. So in that case, the error message would be the user doesn't exist. So you can say here first, say right password or wrong password, and then we need to code for a where we are saying password doesn't exist or user doesn't exist. So for that, we should say that if password from the database, let's write another code. If password from database equal to, then we say echo user does not exist. Okay, now else, then we put this big block. So what we are saying is that if password doesn't exist, that means it's a wrong user. If password exists, then you match it with the what the user has entered, and in case it matches, it's a right password, otherwise it's a wrong password. Okay, so then we just save it here, and then we'll see if go to the form and we'll try to make it work. So let's go back to our login. So let's see. So let's first enter a wrong password, Joe TT. Let's see if your program works. It says wrong password. Now one thing is that somehow we are not getting here password. Yes. The reason being is that we changed the variable name. So if you see in our code last time, password entered, it was password variable, but we changed it to password entered. So we have to change it here also. So now, we have tested this part of code, wrong password. So you entered a password, but it didn't match because the actual password is Joe. So now let's enter the right password, but we enter a wrong username. So now we should get the user doesn't exist. Okay, so user doesn't exist. We get the right one. Now let's enter the right password and see if it matches. Right password. So we tested all three conditions. So now let's say, now in real life, you would write a lot more complicated programs, and sometimes you'll have error, it may not work. So let's try to simulate some of those conditions. So let's say one of the conditions is, let's say we by mistake we entered a wrong table name. Okay. So in this particular case, this table doesn't exist. So maybe users 2ss. So let's see how the error looks like. Okay, if you see error, it says MySQL fetch array supplier argument is not a valid MySQL result. Then it says resource in, it gives you a line number 31. So let's look at line number 31. So it's erroring here, and the reason it is erroring here is because you have assigned result variable and you pass to a query which doesn't work. So that's why the result variable has really garbage value. So that's why it is giving an error in this line number, but actual error really happens here. So let's say this one. So we pass the right number. Now let's say what if the user is blank, right? So let's say if we don't enter any user. So let's say how. So if it doesn't report an error because it's taking user as blank, which is, as from a code or from a code perspective, that's really, I mean, there is no compilation issues. It just takes a value as blank. So to handle that, you might want to, if user equal to, then you can then you do exit. So now in actual life, in real life programming, you would not probably do that, because you will probably do some JavaScript or jQuery validation within HTML itself, so that the person cannot submit the form till he enters the user ID. But for this example, if we do this, and if we resubmit the form, see, it says enter user, and if you see, user is blank. So let's reformat the sentence a little bit. So this is submit.php. Let's add some HTML tags to make separate line. Now, as you see, one thing if you're watching me carefully, I'm not really going back to the form, but I'm just hitting refresh. What that does is that actually the values whichever you entered, they are all in the session. Later on you'll know something about session. So when I submit, it's all those values get again posted. So here we have enter user. So enter user is not coming in the next line. So let's make enter user come in separate line. Enter user. So let's see what else we can do. So we have simulated an error in the database. How about error in PHP code? Well, that we also have entered. Last time I showed, if there is a compiler issues in PHP, you will see how it gives an error. What if you, let's say, in this particular thing fails? So if you say K1 to 81, so then you should see a MySQL error. So let's see how that looks. Okay, let's see. Okay, because it didn't go up to there, because it got caught here only. So let's go back and let's enter user again here, and then so this is the way MySQL error would look like. As you see here, function MySQL connect, access denied for K1 to Edu. So because your password is wrong. So the idea that I'm trying to show you, how different errors look like, and that's and because when you actually do programming, you will see it's always this 80-20 rule, where your 20% of the errors would take up 80% of the time. And a lot of times you can really be more efficient and speed up things if you know how to debug quickly, how to see the errors in your program, and really how to put those different checks and balances. So one of the things is that sometimes errors would not be reported correctly in a way you can identify. So when you have hopefully eventually you'll write a lot of complicated programs on which will involve lots of files. One of the challenges you always have to deal with is that where the error is happening and how to spot it quickly and fix it. So it's important for you to know where the error is. Is it in the PHP? Is it in MySQL? Is it a compilation error? Or is it a runtime error? And all that sort of thing. And so I hope this sort of gave you a good idea how to do basic PHP programming. Now, one thing I must say is that all this, what we are doing is really, my idea is sort of to teach you the basics. But in actual real life programming, you will use a lot of different type of modules or functions and etc. etc. For example, typically you don't connect you don't connect in your code this sort of connection would be handled by some utility, or by if you are doing like a PHP 5 or something, you sometimes you use other class files and etc, etc. So by the time your code comes, by the time the control comes to your program, you probably already have a connection already, so you really don't connect to the DB. So, and also you don't really put username password like that. You probably, these are derived from a config file where password is encrypted and all that sort of thing. I'll also show you the model view controller architecture, which is becoming adopted by most of the PHP applications or PHP programming environment, where you separate out really your database connection from your core logic, and also you would not spit out HTML also at the same time. So those are the things I would love to talk about, and then sort of gives you an idea about how really real life program happens in using PHP. But take this as this sort of but it's important to go through these sort of examples, because if you're new to PHP, sometimes it may be a little bit too complex for you to handle all this. The way I'm teaching, it's a way for us to tell you what are the different elements of PHP, so that you get a good grasp, and then we move on to more advanced topics. So let's stop here. Thank you.